Welcome everyone to the inaugural Dwelt Podcast. My name is Mitch Waite. I'll be your host for this and many of these podcasts. I'm here with Chris Hardman and Dan Jensen. We're excited to spend time together tonight and talk about everything that's going on in the world and how we're going to solve some of these problems. So Chris, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll get going there.
I'm Chris. Most of you who are listening to this will probably be listening to this episode because one of us tweeted about it. So I'm going to assume you at least have an idea of who I am. And I really want to start this podcast off with a sports bro reference because I'm dying. And this is gonna be a like Michael Jordan in the finals performance for me. So I will try and keep it together for the next several hours or however long we go. But I got lots of water. I'll try and keep that quiet or like do some like ASMR stuff with it. I don't know.
Nice.
Well, but I'm excited. This is going to be fun.
Those of you that are watching, Chris actually ran a triathlon this morning. So it was your first of the year. Is that right?
First one this year. Yeah.
Nice. And being the man that we all want to be, Chris, I'm sure just knocked it out, totally PR'd, won your division or something close to that. And so we'll give you all the grace that you can possibly need because I certainly didn't run a triathlon this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Neither did I.
All right, Dan, tell us about yourself.
Awesome. So I don't even know like what to say here, but I am excited to do this podcast because I've always had this dream of being like a famous YouTuber, right? So I do have some YouTube stuff that I've dabbled in, and this type of thing is definitely exciting to me. And met Mitch and Chris probably 7-8 months ago, and we've just had a lot of fun every day working together and being able to have really cool, crazy discussions about everything. And I think I'm excited to be a part of this too, because I have a lot to learn from the things that Mitch and Chris have exposed me to.
One of the things that we just love about Dan is Chris and I will be going off about the latest or the most esoteric, and Dan's like, "Wait, what is this? Tell me more." And so we get to kind of regurgitate stuff to him and test stuff out. And anyway, it's
what do you mean everybody in power is a satanic pedophile?
Exactly.
Great. We're going to be canceled.
Wait, what?
Right off the first few minutes into our first podcast. 3 minutes in and we're going to get canceled.
Yeah.
Well,
why don't you tell us about Dwelt, Mitch, and how we got started with that?
Okay. So I've been homesteading for the past 3 years. I've been part-time ranching for the past 20 years. And we moved to a homestead 3 years ago. And man, the learning curve is pretty steep. And, you know, we have goats and chickens and turkeys and lots of dogs and cats. And we have cows and horses and all the stuff that you could possibly have on a little homestead. A garden where we grow our food and food storage and water collection, all this stuff. And it's like life on hard mode, right? There's a ton to learn. And with everything in the world getting super weird, I'm a big fan of eschatology, signs of the study of the signs of the times. And, love the scriptures, love the words of the prophets. And as prophets continually are saying, we're coming into some change of times, right? We're coming into a new era here. I realized that most people can't do what I've had the opportunity to do, to go live on a homestead and start growing my own food and thinking about water and security and sanitation and medical supplies and storing up food and growing food and all this kind of stuff, animal husbandry. And so most people can't do that because it freaking costs a ton of money to buy land. Interest rates are terrible. Like you can't find anything that's affordable. And, people in town love having access to stores and schools and gasoline and stuff like that. And so the idea for Dwelt came with, as people are looking to homestead, or as people are looking for food security or a bug out location, what can we do to make that possible, make it attainable, where they don't have to buy their own land, they don't have to build their own residence. I'm speaking right now from the first Dwelt shipping container home. I've always wanted to build a shipping container home, and so here we are, the first one. It's a 40-foot high cube, all these windows and doors, and it's totally self-sustaining and portable. And so I'm doing all of this, and I'm like, other people want to do this. Other people want to have this. How in the world can we possibly make it available to everyone? And so that's the start of Dwelt, meeting with Chris and Dan and talking with others. It's like, hey, let's create a homesteading membership where people can pay a little bit of money down, pay every month, access the homestead that we run. We get the pigs and the goats and the chickens and the cows, and we grow the garden and put up the greenhouse and get all the water working. And so you show up on the weekend and homestead and live the homesteading dream. And then when things get super weird, you have a place to go to that you're already familiar with, that you spent time on, and you've built a community of people. I imagine there are a lot of people, boomers, that will say, hey, I need Dwelt memberships for all my kids. And so they'll have their kids and their grandkids around them. And, when the cities are dangerous, when shipping goes down, when fuel is not available, they'll have a place to go that they already love and have spent time. And we imagine these Dwelt locations will be all across the nation, 50 miles minimum from major population centers. So short enough that you could walk if you had to, but long enough that most people won't walk to get there. I say distance is your second greatest asset in something like this. And so that's the origin story of Dwelt. That's kind of the vision for it. And we've got a ton of homesteading content. We've got off-grid living content. We have a whole community of off-grid experts that do everything from water and solar and living spaces and security and gardening and all that kind of stuff. So we'll bring them all on. We've got, Chris, who's an expert in fitness and wellness. We're going to need to get in shape for the coming times. And so anyway, it's about providing a way for people to do that and helping them develop the skills so that when it all comes burning to the ground, we can thrive and rebuild.
The biggest challenge with Dwelt is just getting it all done before it all comes burning to the ground.
Yes.
Yeah, I really worry about that. As you guys know, I think there are a few things in the Old Testament, in Isaiah, that are very precise and very specific to time frames. And I'm not a big timeline guy. Like I have some ideas and stuff like that, but they're all wrong, I'm sure, on timeline. But just seeing what's going on in the world, it's like we've already had a time period where everything was shut down. We were locked home. The missionaries came home. The temples were closed. The churches were closed. So we've already had kind of the trial run. And I don't think it'll be long before the real thing hits. And a lot of personalities are talking about that right now. I mean, Glenn Beck's talking about a Black Swan event. Ron Paul was on a podcast. Was it Joe Rogan? One of the podcasts.
I think it was Tucker.
Oh yeah, it was Tucker. And he's talking about, some Black Swan event is going to happen. General Flynn talked about a Black Swan event. And Dan's like, what's a Black Swan event? Dan, we lost you.
I'm here.
Okay.
I was just thinking that exact thing. I'm like, it sounds familiar, but I'm not 100% sure what that is. So,
Chris, what's your take on Black Swan?
So for those familiar with Ezra's Eagle, one of the theories is that a Black Swan event is going to be, I guess, what ushers in the first Eagle head. And I kind of resisted that for a while, but as things continue to develop, it's just seeming more and more likely to me, especially with, I heard a call with Clay Martin, who some of you may know from X, and he was saying like any of our enemies probably have tens of thousands of people in the country at this point, and like if you don't think that's a problem, you're insane. So it just seems like a matter of time until something happens.
Yeah, I look at it and a big thing for me is the election. Everybody I talk to, I mean, it doesn't matter. I was on a business trip in California, guys who are not like me at all, right? I mean, these guys they have a garage full of Maybachs and Bugattis and Lamborghinis and just, all that kind of stuff. And the election comes up and they like give you the side eye, like, yeah, I'm not so sure this one's going to go well, right? The last one was rough enough. This one is not great. And so I look to, the next year, and the two candidates are of age and embroiled in controversy and stuff like that. And so when I think of Black Swan, I think, okay, what happens come January 2025 if there's no one to inaugurate? You think about what that does to the dollar, what that does to the federal government. The legislature will take over, the legislative branch will take over, quickly followed by the judicial branch filing suit on whatever the legislative branch decides. I mean, it's likely to be a mess. And, once that happens, stock market's going to get frozen. Like, all this stuff will happen and it'll cascade worldwide. And I think that's Glenn Beck was mentioning the other day about, it's not going to be a recession. It's not going to be a depression. It's going to be economic collapse. And, that's rough. And that's 12 months away, less than 12 months away.
I have a friend who owns a business, and he went through the 2008 recession and stuff. And so it destroyed all the businesses he owned then. So he's built this business in his mind to withstand any kind of downturn. And he's like, if there's another recession, I'm going to be okay. And I was like, I got bad news for you, man. If there's another recession, it's the end. Like it's over. It's not going to be just a little dip. It's through. It's all done.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
Yeah, so Dan, that's the concept of Black Swan. I don't know where the term comes from, but I think there was a Natalie Portman movie or something, Black Swan. Anyway,
I don't think it's connected to ballet. That was a ballet movie.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's basically the idea that
takes
something,
down.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
could be an EMP, it could be someone hacks the power grid, could just be the government collapses for some reason. I mean, and the thing is, I feel like the world, that there's so many things it could be at this point, and the world is so connected, just globally, that if something were to happen here, for example, in the United States, it's not just going to be a local problem. It's going to cascade across the globe. So it's going to be fun. Hope you guys are ready.
I've got a buddy, former neighbor of mine, who super smart guy. He's a professor at a university at BYU, and love the guy to death. Like, he served my family. He's amazing. But he was like, the economy is really resilient because everybody has a vested interest in making it work. And so you get hundreds of millions of people or billions of people globally working together to solve things. He's like, yeah, we as humanity are really resilient. My response to that is, yes, we're really resilient. And there are people all over this world living in very difficult circumstances. We're I'm roughing it in this off-grid little cabin that is perfectly warm and sealed up and like awesome. So yes, humanity is very resilient, but so much of what we've built on is just-in-time inventory. So the inventory is in the supply chain, which originates not on our shores. Like, we don't have very many factories building stuff. So that means it's got to go from where it's built to here and then get delivered and and consumed here. And man, if shipping goes down, if petroleum goes down, if any of those things happen, communications, electricity, you mentioned EMPs, it's enough to take everything down and put us all in a really bad spot. I was listening to a book the other day that talked about how the U.S. government has 6 million MREs, the military meals ready to eat, kind of like what they dropped in Gaza a few weeks ago, and the guys were complaining about the quality of the food that they were getting. 6 million MREs. So if we have a nationwide event of 300 million people, that gives 6 million people one meal, because they're counting on localized events, a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, or something like that. And a black swan event that hits petroleum or electricity or transportation, it's going to affect a heck of a lot more than 6 million people.
Might just be a little bit of a problem.
Yeah. So that's, back to the Dwelt concept. That's why people need to be familiar with growing their own food and doing animal husbandry. We just had our baby goats born, and you can check those out at Wait Utah Beef Instagram. My wife keeps everybody up to date on what's going on at the farm. So we've got all these new baby goats. Chris came down last weekend and saw the baby goats, and we bottle feed them and all that kind of stuff. But you have to know animal husbandry. So my wife's watching one of the goats give birth, and she goes, "Oh, that one needs help," and goes over and helps pull the baby out. You got to know when that's supposed to happen. And we've been doing this for, at least on the ranching side, for 20, almost 30 years now. And so we know animal husbandry, but there's so many skills that we just don't have as we go to our job in Silicon Slopes and type on our keyboard and do project management or like build web pages and stuff. There's a lot that we need to understand. So earlier we were talking about the news today and yesterday of this event in Russia where guys stormed a theater and shot everything up, and then they got them. Looks like they captured all of them.
They did.
Interrogated the crap out of them. Interrogated, quote unquote. Some of those guys look pretty rough.
They, I don't know how gruesome we want to get, but one of the terrorists had his ear cut off and fed to him. So that's what the Russian special forces are doing.
Well, one guy, when he was being interviewed,
Let's
was
go to
shivering.
war with them.
Yeah. He was shivering, and I'm like, yeah, you can get a lot out of somebody if they're freezing to death. Anyway,
yeah,
so
no kidding.
What'd they say? They got paid 500,000 rubles to do it.
Yep, 500,000 rubles. They got guns, I believe, sent to them.
Yeah, just like dropped off to them, right?
Yeah, and they were fleeing back into. I say back into, just subconsciously. They were fleeing into Ukraine. I think, is it confirmed they came from Ukraine?
I don't know. I don't know if it is. It might be. I mean,
I know one of them had fought for Ukraine, but I don't know if all of them had.
Okay. I did see, information is coming in slowly, but I did see ISIS, like, oh, this was funded by ISIS and the weapons were supplied by ISIS and stuff like that. And I'm sure there's some cells of ISIS around, but we haven't heard that name in a long time.
Just so you're aware, Dan, if anybody is saying ISIS or Ukraine or Israel, it's just the CIA. And
What?
I'm sure Putin knows that. So it's a great thing. We're in a great situation. I'm sure nothing terrible will happen because of it.
So you're saying the CIA is running all of it?
I'm not saying anything.
Oh, okay.
I'm just
people are saying.
Other people are saying that it might be the CIA. It's not me.
Wow.
I love the CIA. Big fan.
They're the best. Best. It's funny. I've traveled a bit around the world. I've spent time in South America as an LDS missionary, but then also afterwards, I've spent time in Europe and Africa, And it's interesting in Liberia, where I traveled fairly extensively, there's a very common belief that the CIA is behind every plot and doing all this stuff. And same thing in South America. I was in Chile, which had a coup in the 70s and Pinochet and all that kind of stuff. And everybody's like, oh yeah, the CIA, the CIA. And so I think it's pretty easy. I mean, what was the pipeline that was blown up? And, then it comes out later, well, maybe the Americans did that, and Putin is like, yeah, the Americans did that.
Yeah.
Something like this, it's terrifying to think of what Putin would do to respond. And actually, as I was connecting to this, I was scrolling through X and seeing that bombers from Russia are heading over to Ukraine they expect a carpet bombing, like terrible bombing within the next hour, basically.
Yeah, I've been refreshing to see if anything has happened yet, but I think it's 14 bombers that are capable of holding nuclear weapons or like long range traditional weapons. And so I have a feeling somewhere in Ukraine is going to have a bad night tonight.
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. And so you think about, I mean, when was the last time we had this type of world event to this level? I mean, I'm almost 50 years old, and I remember one or two events in my, childhood, teens, 20s of maybe a quarter or an eighth of this magnitude. And now these types of things are happening more and more frequently. But I mean, slaughter of civilians in Russia with ties to at least Ukraine, like you mentioned. And then who's funding the Ukrainians? Oh, a lot of countries are, but I know one country that's funding them quite a bit. And there's some pretty severe implications of that. It's crazy.
It's crazy to be in a situation where you're hoping that like the guy who's technically your enemy is the one who will stay level-headed. Like, please, Putin, don't do anything crazy. I'm sorry that we keep doing something crazy, but like keep your head on straight.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to all blow each other up in nuclear war.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy times.
It is.
Okay. So I had some neighbors drop by. These people are building their off-grid homestead, and they wanted to see the first Dwelt model home. And so they came in and looked at it, and they were like, oh, this is so cool. This is what we want to do. And they've got some building restrictions with the county, so they can't actually build a house. They have to have anything that they put up there has to be like a trailer. And so shipping container is more like a home than a trailer is. It's more resilient. It can provide a bigger living space, arguably. And so they came to check it out. They're building their homestead. And the one guy, man, I love him to death, but he's all about, he's like a Ezra Taft Benson generation where he's all anti-communism. Communism has killed more tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, more people than anything else. And communism is coming to the US and stuff like that. I'm like, bro, communism is already here. But he's talking about, he's got this perspective of, we got to look out for the commies. The commies are coming. We gotta have our guns and have our ammo because the commies are coming. And I'm like, I think obviously, like ideologically, there are communist party members all throughout the US, tons in the cities. It's taught in universities, stuff like that. But I'm like, I'm not so sure it's going to be like a communist invasion. He's got this almost like Red Dawn type. Oh, it's going to be Red Dawn. They're going to be dropping in and like taking over the cities and stuff like that. I'm like, no, dude, not yet. Like maybe in the future, but I think we have to collapse first. And we go through this period of no presidents, and then we go through this period of legal battles in the legislature and the judicial branch. And we've got 10 FEMA regions that all have their figureheads that'll say, hey, we'll take care of things while while things are in disarray, and we'll have martial law and all these different challenges like that. I'm like, once everything is really bad and we're really weak, that's when we start to see these challenges happen.
Hold on, are you saying the 10 FEMA regions will be like the 10 kings without, what is it, 10 kings without a nation or something like that?
I don't know about that, but I've often thought that in Daniel 7, I think, the statue, Nebuchadnezzar's statue that's got all the kingdoms and they get knocked down, and there's the feet, and feet have 10 toes. And for the longest time, I've thought those 10 FEMA regions are the 10 toes on the feet of the statue. And so when the rock, it's carved without hands, comes down and knocks out all the kingdoms of the world, that we will be this mixture of the clay and the iron, and we will have already separated from one nation under God and into this 10 FEMA region thing. And I think, the Mountain West, specifically with Utah and the LDS people, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I mean, the church, as others call us, the Mormons, the Mormon church, we have food production, food storage. We have equipment. We send aid all around the world. Trucks are already packed and ready to go. Containers full of supplies already going all around the world to help people out. And so I imagine a time when we get to 10 FEMA regions that the headquarters of our FEMA region is Denver. And so they'll be like, hey, these guys in Salt Lake, they've got their own authority structure and communication and resources. They're not playing nice. Like, we all should, take our power back or whatever. But yeah, I think the U.S. falls apart before any foreign powers come and cause problems.
Yeah, I agree. It's too hard to invade the United States unless we're already in pieces.
Yeah. And then it's like, they'll show up and be like, we got Florida,
Yeah. Deseret will stand.
Well, that's scriptural, right? I mean, if you go through Isaiah, the Assyrian invades and mows down everybody, and everybody has to flee to the tops of the mountains. And I'm convinced that that's here. So the Assyrian will come probably from all sides. Whoever the Assyrian is will come from all sides and end up here. And people will be fleeing here for safety. And so, again, for Dwelt, it's like, if people have to come here for safety, then we better have places of refuge ready for them to receive them and provide food and safety and stuff like that.
Do you have any opinion on some of like the more pressing signs, like potentially the eclipse or this potential sacrifice in Jerusalem or wherever it is, somewhere in Israel, of the red heifers?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, man, there's so much. And I've got opinions about all this stuff. So let's talk.
I'll just say
eclipse.
I was agnostic on the eclipse. I don't know. I didn't think it was, maybe it's like a small sign, but I didn't think anything big of it. But like over the last week, I feel like more and more weird things have been happening around those dates. Like just the lightning strikes we just saw come through, the exact same pattern that the eclipse was going to go through. And then, and then the issue they're issuing, like, that there could be aircraft problems, which is kind of crazy. Communication
That's right.
problems,
Yeah,
like the internet's going to go down, like all kinds of weird stuff. So,
yeah. Can you guys hear? It's raining really, really hard outside. Can you hear that?
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I think it's soothing.
Maybe we should talk about more calming subjects. So
Well, the lightning's pretty wild behind you. So it's
can
not
you
very
see that
calming.
flashing?
Yeah.
So actually, I did some research on this just recently. So We have family that will be in the totality of the eclipse. Like they live in the totality of the eclipse in Texas. And so they've invited us. My father-in-law, who is literally the best man in the world, just I revere him for who he is. He loves this kind of stuff. We met up with him for the last eclipse that crossed the US, and that, okay, I gotta talk about the eclipse a little bit more. So we went to Wyoming and saw the eclipse up there, and I thought it would be a cool event. I've always looked up at the sky, and especially being a homesteader, man, I'm watching the sky all the time. And so we went up there, and saw it getting closer and getting closer. But the second that thing hit totality, I had a spiritual experience. It wasn't like, something was revealed to me, but I just felt like God's hand in all of this. And I was like, I will now go to every eclipse that there ever is, because I want to feel this and witness this. Like it's orchestrated and it's powerful. And so we have the opportunity to go to the eclipse, and my kids are jazzed about it. I've been jazzed about it. But then you see all these videos that are like, oh, it's the Aleph and it's the Tav, and it's like the sign that things are going to go bad. And then you've got FEMA warnings and FAA warnings and FCC warnings and local governments and National Guards and all this kind of stuff. And just like yesterday, I thought, they don't want us to see the eclipse. They don't want us to go. They don't want us to have this moment of like witnessing the power and orchestration of God in all of this. And so we're going. And yeah, we're gonna plan on walking back if we have to. But I'm bringing fuel. I'm bringing food. We're bringing, all of our camping equipment that we will need. But I'm planning on going because I loved being in this field with thousands of other people and having everyone have this like spiritual experience together. It's amazing.
Sounds pretty
and
cool.
You said that's in Texas. Is that where it's at? The totality, or where's that going to be?
It crosses the U.S. It goes from the Northeast all the way down through Texas. And it happens to pass through western Missouri, nearby Adirondack, not over Adirondack, but the cross. And there's like all this stuff. Like it goes through a bunch of, is it Nineveh? Like 7 Ninevehs or something like that. And so people think, oh, it's an omen of Nineveh, the fall of Nineveh or the conversion of Nineveh, whatever it is. And so anyway, there's lots of talk about that. And it's a crisscross from the last one. And the center point is also near western Missouri, which is, a sacred place for Latter-day Saints. So Chris, go ahead.
If it makes you feel better, I don't think it's going to be like, as the eclipse is happening, the earth blows up. You'll probably have like at least like a few days after.
It's before it blows up.
It's a sign of what's coming, not the thing that's coming.
Well, there was something that just came out the other day about bioterrorism, bioattacks. I think it was a FEMA, I don't know what it was, but somebody was like, hey, there's a warning to National Guards or something about being prepared for bioattacks. And I think where that probably comes from, if it's not a real threat, but anytime you get a group of tens of thousands or millions of people together in a place, there's a risk, and somebody lighting off a dirty bomb is the biggest risk. And so I think that's why that came up. And
it's interesting. I mean, the time frame, I don't know if you guys follow Deja Rue on X, but he is kind of like an esoteric poster, I would say. Kind of a cool guy, but he has this weird, I don't even know what I would call it, this weird ability to like predict dates. So for example, he had been tweeting the day October 7th for like 6 months before that happened, that
Oh,
something
wow.
was going to happen on that day. And he's done it a few times. And I just saw, it was either today or yesterday, he posted that April 6th, something was going to happen. I'm like, well, April 6th is first day of conference. So you have conference weekend, and then is the eclipse Monday, or is it
The
like
8th.
2 days? Is it okay?
Monday the 8th.
Yeah.
So it's like conference, eclipse. If this red heifer thing happens during that sometime, I don't know. It's just, things are lining up very strangely.
Yeah. So the red heifer thing, it's kind of an interesting. I've been following it for a number of reasons. Number one, I love this stuff. And number two, I'm a rancher, and so they, we breed cows, and my wife just yesterday we were commenting about this one calf that we have that's like 6 inches, 8 inches taller than all the other calves. And he's like longer. And he came from this one cow that the last calf that cow had was also huge. And so we're like, man, whatever customer buys that beef is loving it because it's huge, and we talk about the bloodlines and how we breed them and get the best ones and all that kind of stuff. Well, so I've been following the red heifers for a couple of years now, and they had to go hair by hair, like every single hair, to make sure it was red on these heifers. And they've been breeding them down in Texas for a long time to try to get the perfectly red heifer. So they got them, they flew them over to Israel. They have built an altar on the Mount of Olives for these red heifers. And the source of it is in the book of Numbers, where Israel is basically said, is told by the Lord, find red heifers. They must be perfect, without blemish, all this kind of stuff, and sacrifice them before you can build the temple. And so that's what this is all about. I think they're primarily Messianic Jews, Christians or Jews that believe that Jesus was the Christ, kind of got after this and said, hey, we need to start finding red heifers so we can rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And so they've bred them, they've got them, they've taken them over there. They're ready to be slaughtered any day. They built the altar on the Mount of Olives. And the big problem with this is there's already a building on the Temple Mount, and it's the Dome of the Rock. It is it's a mosque. And so they're saying, hey, if those guys are going to slaughter these heifers, that is them telling us they're going to take out our mosque, the most sacred spot where Allah appeared to Muhammad, and they're going to knock down our sacred spot to build their temple. And so that's what's behind that whole thing. And so then you've got, I don't know, 1 billion, 2 billion Muslims worldwide. You got 1 billion Christians, and I don't know how many millions of Jews. And there you go. He's inspecting every single hair has to be red on that thing. So this is all happening this week, and it is a sure sign to Islam that the Jews want that land back, and that the believers in the Messiah and Messianic Jews who believe that Christ was the Messiah and is coming again, that they got to have a temple prepared for him. And that could kick off major problems.
Somebody on X was talking about this and reference to scripture. I should have saved it, but it was basically like I'm going to really butcher this, so I'm sorry, but like once the sons of Levi or whatever do the sacrifice, then there will be no more of whatever. So he was like, if this happens, then we're not going to do the sacrament anymore, or baptisms or something. Have you heard anything like that? I can't imagine that's true, but
well, I saw the post, and it is. Let me find it here. I think it's. I believe it's one. Give me a second. Okay. So, Doctrine and Covenants 128. Behold, the great day of the Lord is at hand, and who can abide the day of his coming, and who can stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like a fuller's soap. and he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. Let us, therefore, as a church and a people and as Latter-day Saints, offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness, and let us present it in his holy temple when it is finished, a book containing the records of our dead, which shall be worthy of all acceptation. So the Levites in the Old Testament were the ones that officiated in the ordinances of the temple. And so what this guy is saying is, once the Levites are able to officiate in the ordinances of the temple again, then, or in all of the ordinances, then we won't have any sacrament. And that's ridiculous. Like, you've heard that a bishop is called to be a bishop and serves as a bishop, especially as a presiding bishop, until the time that a pure descendant of Aaron comes forth, and then that pure descendant of Aaron has a right to be a bishop. He can just be like, I'm a bishop because I'm a pure descendant of Aaron. And so I kind of think this guy might have conflated the two, where if the Levites are able to offer a sacrifice in righteousness, an offering in righteousness, that they have a right to do that, which that's fine. As far as I know, we don't have any Levites that are pure Levites around us. And so I'm not concerned about that in terms of the red heifers. Where it will come to play is when the lost tribes come back, and to organize those millions and millions of people, I think they will be organized to do the work that they have a right to, that they originally were called to. So that's where I think he's probably conflating the two. And a lot of believers these days think about gathering Israel as being missionary work, which it is. Gathering Israel's missionary work. But if you look at the Articles of Faith, it says two things. We believe in the literal gathering of Israel and in the return of the lost tribes. So they're two separate things. Oh, I got balloons for that. Did you guys see
Nice.
balloons go?
Yeah, I saw that. I guess I really like what you're saying.
It's like, that's right. The tribes will return.
You nailed it.
So
Well,
yeah.
hey,
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to change topics. I'm saying while we're on the topic, where do you think the lost tribes are coming from?
Oh, dude, I know exactly where the lost tribes are. They're lost.
I mean,
it's like
fair.
waiting for you to tell me.
I just did. That's what the scriptures say. They're lost.
Where are they lost?
Well, they're not lost unto the Lord. I'll tell you that.
That's
but
true.
we know in Doctrine and Covenants 133, there's some cool stuff in here that we all know, but it's worth a review. So DNC 133:26, and they who are in the north countries shall come in remembrance before the Lord, and their prophets shall hear his voice, and shall no longer stay themselves, and they shall smite the rocks, and the ice shall flow down at their presence, and an highway shall be cast up in the midst of the great deep. Their enemies shall become a prey unto them, and in the barren deserts there shall come forth pools of living water, and the parched grounds shall no longer be a thirsty land. And they shall bring forth their rich treasures unto the children of Ephraim, my servants. And the boundaries of the everlasting hills shall tremble at their presence, and there shall they fall down and be crowned with glory, even in Zion, by the hands of the servants of the Lord, even the children of Israel. And they shall be filled with the songs of everlasting joy. Behold, this is the blessing of the everlasting God upon the tribes of Israel, and the richer blessing upon the head of Ephraim and his fellows. So we know that there's ice involved. We know that the great deep is involved, which some people translate to heaven. Some people translate to the ocean. It actually kind of ties back to Isaiah chapter 7. Let me just go to Isaiah chapter 7. So this is when Isaiah is talking to Ahaz, the king of Judah. So you've got Judah in the south, Israel in the north, and Syria also north of Judah. And he tells Ahaz, look for a sign. He says in verse 11, ask thee a sign of the Lord thy God, ask it either in the depth or in the height above. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, neither will I tempt the Lord. And Isaiah's like, bro, let me just tell you the sign. And so he says, therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel. And so Isaiah describes the Revelation 12 sign, which is a sign that happened in the sky, in the stars. And it was referred to when he told Ahaz to ask for a sign. He said, ask it either in the depth or in the height above, which could be an either or, but it could also be a clarification. Ask for it in the depth, which is the height above. And so you got guys like Michael B. Rush who are saying, oh, that's space. So the lost tribes will come from space. And I think that's where, he gets that, but kind of fascinating. DNC 133, those things I'm convinced will happen in our day as we live. And I'm almost 50 years old. And so 30 years within the next 30 years, maybe. But I actually think it'll be a lot sooner than that. So crazy times. Where do you think they are, Chris?
To agree. Where do I think they are?
You think they're, yeah.
I think they are in all of the possible locations. I can't commit to one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm like, I find all the theories very interesting, and I'm willing to wait and see which one turns out to be true. But personally, I've always been a fan of like the hollow earth theory, that they're like in the earth somewhere.
Oh, it's so cool.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
This reminded me.
Heard.
we can get into it in a second. I'm going to share this tweet because I just saw this today. So this is from Awakened Day Saint. We're going to connect a couple things, I guess. We're going to connect that DNC verse and the stuff happening in Russia.
I saw this. I loved this. This is great.
So he has a quote from Joseph Smith about Russia where he says, England and France are now bitter enemies, but they will be allied together and be united to keep Russia from conquering the world. I think you could say right now that has happened.
Yeah.
England and France are definitely united in the whole Ukraine-Russia thing. So there's that.
Yeah.
And then he says, but when the great bear Russia lays her paw on the lion England, the winding up scene is not far distant. So I don't know. You say from the north. There's another part in here. Let me scroll down and see if I can find it. Where he's talking about, dang it, somebody replied with another quote. And is it this one? Oh, yeah, Joseph Smith. Okay, Russia is more than simply an enemy. Joseph Smith said that it is key to the building of the kingdom, but couldn't then elaborate. So it makes you wonder what role Russia is going to play in all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that. One of the things that, you get all these apocryphal quotes from Joseph Smith or from Latter-day Prophets. People write them down in their journals and they share them. They can't be substantiated and stuff like that. And but some of them have been faith inspiring for generations. I will be talking to my dad and he'll say something like this, like, oh, or my brother will be like, oh yeah, you got to keep an eye on Chicago because there was a Joseph Smith quote about Chicago and the dollar falling and stuff like that. And it's like, great. I will, just like you said about where the lost tribes are, I'll take it. Like I'll take any tidbit of information that I can that's going to help me identify what's actually going on and help me prepare myself and my family to be in a situation to help. So one of my buddies was like, Mitch, you're crazy. You're going to go to the eclipse. Like there's going to be millions of people in Texas there just for the eclipse. It doesn't have the infrastructure to handle the fuel and the groceries and the highways and emergency response and all that kind of stuff. Are you crazy? Why are you going there? And I was like, well, number one, I want to go. I want to have this experience of witnessing what I think is a great manifestation of the power of God. But also, if that's true, I want to be there to help. Like, I know first aid. I'm pretty able-bodied. Like, I have a lot of knowledge about how stuff works, not a ton, but enough to get by. And so if I can be in a position to help, I want to be there to help. I would hate to just be like, no, I'm good. I'm here on my homestead. All those fetchers over there, they can just die, So I think that's kind of the attitude that I take. And, not to plug Dwelt again, this podcast is brought to you by Dwelt, but it's like, if we can create these communities across the US where people can be productive and know how to rebuild, then as refugees come out of the population centers and into the rural areas, we'll be better equipped to receive them. And that brings back the apocryphal stories from presidents of the church. I mean, there's tons of different accounts of that. I mean, there's the John Taylor vision that's recorded in Wilford Woodruff's journal that talks about refugees walking across the plains, mostly women and children, carrying just a knapsack of everything that they own as they try to get to the mountains for safety. And it's like, if we don't have safety here for them, did we really do our job? But with Dwelt and homesteading, yeah, come one, come all. We want you to come here. We're going to have food for you. We're going to have clothing for you. We want to help.
I'm going to read the Chicago quote.
Yeah.
Because we just said, we were just talking before this about that the country's going to collapse. And you just said people will be walking from the Midwest to here. So I feel like Chicago is relevant to this. So
yeah,
here it is. Prophet Joseph. Okay, so Noah Packard says that he heard the prophet Joseph say that the next great U.S. Civil War, after the War of the Rebellion, would commence in a little town now called Chicago, but at that time it would have grown to be a very large city. And another brother told me that the prophet said that the cause of the next great trouble of the United States would be the depreciation of the currency of the United States. So there you go.
Nice. Well, we're feeling it right now. I mean, how much does your dollar buy for you these days? How far can you stretch it?
That's the thing. I've told you guys this. Like, I hang out with a lot of different people who, I don't hang out with liberals, but I hang out with people who vote for Nikki Haley, which is maybe just as bad. But they all feel the same thing. Like, they all have this sense that something is coming. So I think people can feel it in the air.
Yeah. Man, you brought up Hollow Earth, and Dan's like, what's that?
Yeah. I'm taking notes too on all this, like, so I can go read up on all of it.
So I'm a bit of a different Hollow Earther than I used to be. So I used to be like, oh yeah, of course the earth is hollow and the tribes are in there. And, you've got tons of accounts of people, not tons, but a handful of accounts of people who actually, passed through the North Pole into the center of the earth and experienced that. And, different peoples who have different technology, different clothing, they're bigger, different societies and stuff like that. There's a ton on that. Chris can probably do some Googling while we're on here and pull up a couple of those accounts. I've read most of them. For me,
I've become Jamie.
Yeah, you're Jamie.
Chris,
Jamie,
pull
that up. I love it. The thing that really got me into Hollow Earth is my experience with physics, which I'm not a physicist, but you think about what is the only sphere in nature that we witness all the time. There's spheres that we see in nature all the time. It's a bubble, right? You see a bubble is a sphere. Anything else may be a spheroid, but really a bubble is the sphere that we're familiar with. Well, what forms a bubble? It's surface tension. Oops, I hit my mic. It's surface tension and equal pressure outside and inside. You get too much pressure on a bubble from the outside, and it collapses. You get too much pressure from a bubble on the inside and it collapses. So how in the world do you have a huge mass of liquid iron and then molten rock and then a crust spinning wildly through the universe that it doesn't just fly apart with all that mass? Well, the answer is gravity. And, you ask scientists, well, what is gravity? And they're like, well, we can observe it, but we don't know what it is. It's some great force, right? And so that's what got me on the hollow earth was I'm like, well, it has to have equal pressure inside and outside. And that's the only way the sphere stays together with it spinning through space and moving at, hundreds of thousands of miles per hour. But I no longer believe that. So there you go. There's the entrance through the North Pole.
North Pole entrance, Dan. If you can get up there, you can check it out for yourself. You can go visit Agartha. Did I say that right?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. So this is like a legendary city that's supposed to be in the earth, right?
Yep.
And then they say there's a sun.
Or a people.
Yeah. It's like very esoteric. I don't know where it started from. I know like the Nazis were obsessed with finding it. I didn't switch to this, but here it is.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So there was a guy that I can't remember who was sailing. I think it was English or something like that. We're sailing down near South America, and they come up across this boat, the ship that has no sails, and it's like stranded, and they pull up to it, and there's a dude on there, and they can't understand him. He's Norwegian. And so they rescue him because they're like, oh, this ship, is destitute out here. So they rescue the guy. They take him back to England, and they finally figure out that he speaks Norwegian. And they're like, dude, you're from Norway. What storm blew you all the way to South America? Like, the trade winds don't go that way. And he tells this story that he was sailing with his father northward toward the North Pole, and a fog settled in, and after a long, long time, the fog opened up, and they had traveled into the center of the earth, and it was beautiful and green and lush, and they met these people in Agartha. There was a sun, and they spent time there. His dad passed away, and then he sailed out the opposite way and ended up in South America, and through storms as he was coming out, his ship was incapacitated.
It is interesting to think of how many UFO stories are of the UFOs coming out of the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
And if that's part of this, I don't know.
And then the Antarctic Treaty. Like, why the crap can't we go to Antarctica? And why does every nation on the earth have a treaty for Antarctica? It's just weird.
Here's an illustration of what someone saw there. So cool. If you get to the center of Earth, you can expect to see whatever this is, demons. There's also, if I scroll down, some tree people. Maybe this is more tree people. Maybe this is where Tolkien got his stuff from.
Maybe.
There's like okay, we will get to the the South Pole thing, the Antarctica. But there is this whole like conspiracy theory that Tolkien had access in the basement of Oxford, I think it was Oxford, to these ancient maps of the world, and that whole like Middle Earth thing was actually real. That's just been erased from history, and
he was trying to get the message out.
Yeah. He was like connected to the Freemasons, and there's all that kind of stuff too, but it's pretty interesting. So I see tree people. I gotta wonder.
There you go.
Tree people in the middle of the earth.
Not very many people are thinking about tree people.
I never have until right now. So
I haven't either.
fascinating to me. Like, we're all trying to find the answers. We're all trying to find the solution because we really want to know. We want to avoid deception. Like, when the lost tribes come, we want to recognize them for who they are, and we don't want to make a mistake. I mean, how many movies have been made in Hollywood about, these invading aliens, and, we fight back and we battle with them, and then eventually we realize they were just here to help us, right? Or there was a great misunderstanding, and it set off this whole thing. And we've been told by church leaders over and over again to prepare against deception. This kind of brings the conversation maybe to AI. I know, Chris, you are an extensive AI user. Anybody that follows me on X knows that I've been posting, mid-journey content. I've been messing around with AI on that. But we recently had Elder Gong talk about artificial intelligence and how the church is going to use it, and some guidelines against, or guidelines for using it. I think they even showed a video in Elder Gong's presentation of him saying something that he never said, that had his mouth moving and his voice speaking, and pretty crazy stuff there. What are your thoughts on that, Chris? I know you could spend hours on this one.
I am probably boring and think that AI is not like demonic or anything. I'm like the ultimate conspiracy theorist, and then we get to AI, and I'm like, I don't know. I think it's just, I don't know. I personally, there's like this whole side of like second coming prophecy or just prophecy in general, where they like really incorporate it with technology. There's like technological reasons for all the stuff that happens.
Oh, okay.
But I tend to side more on like, no, it's like actual miracles. Like, you're not going to be able to explain it with technology. The bad people are going to have power from Satan, just like Pharaoh's priests did. And they're going to actually perform miracles, and nobody's going to be able to explain how they're doing it. And the good people will do the same.
You're talking like, what is it? Revelation 13, where the beast calls down fire from heaven and performs all these miracles. You don't think that'll be technology based. You think that'll actually be like Pharaoh's magicians turning a stick into a snake.
Yeah. And maybe it's because I got started in conspiracies with like more paranormal type stuff. I mean, I've always been like, when I was in junior high, I would stay up till 2 a.m. and listen to Coast to Coast every night, and like, and then be too scared to sleep because I thought a skinwalker was coming for me or something, or like the Hat Man was going to be in my room.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe it's because that's where I started, like this journey. But I think it's going to be, I just, for some reason, don't like the technology angle. It doesn't feel right to me. And maybe it's because I think technology won't really exist at that point the way it does now. Well, it's going to collapse.
Okay. So there's actual scriptural evidence for that. Micah chapter 5, which incidentally is, I believe, the reason that Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem. They didn't, the Gospels say they went there to be taxed. Maybe they went there and got counted or got taxed. But literally in Micah chapter 5, it says the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. And so Mary has an angel come to her that says, hey, you're going to give birth to the Messiah. And Joseph also receives the same witness. Joseph's like, maybe I'll just put her away privately, right? And the angel comes to him and is like, bro, the Messiah is going to be born of Mary. Like, you got to be here for this. And so they go to Bethlehem because in Micah chapter 5, it says that the Messiah is going to be born there. So they're like, well, we know we're giving birth to the Messiah, so let's go to the place where he's supposed to be born. And so they go there and he's born. But in that same chapter, it brings up Assyria, the Assyrian that Isaiah talks about over and over for the last days. Like, this Assyrian's going to come. He's going to invade the land. He's going to destroy all the men. There will barely be women and children left. And yet the Lord will redeem Israel. The Lord will save his covenant people. The remnant of Jacob will return. That's in there, verses 7 and 8. And he actually says that the Lord, and so in verse 10, and it shall come to pass in that day. So in the day when the Assyrians hear, the day when the lost tribes of Jacob come back, that I will cut off thy horses out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy chariots, and I will cut off the cities of the lands and throw down all thy strongholds. He'll eliminate the images, the graven images, the idols, the groves, the soothsayers, the witchcraft, all of that kind of stuff. Well, I think, you might look at that and go, great, all of the evil will be wiped out. But he also mentioned horses and chariots. Like when it's time to go back to Missouri, we're walking. Like, yeah, you may have a Sherp, one of those, you may have a tank, you may have whatever, all that's going to be destroyed. We're going to be walking. And so if you can imagine a time where we have a lack of presidents, which again goes back to Isaiah chapter 7. We'll go through that at some point, but we have no president. We have turmoil in the legislature, turmoil in the judiciary. Economy fails. Once the economy fails, there's no fuel. There may be electricity, but all of a sudden we are really, really weak. Invading armies come in with the Assyrian, whether they're domestic armies or foreign armies, and they wipe out all of the men. And then some being appears on the world stage that is like, I'm going to solve all of this. I'm going to fix everything. My people that I come from, we have all the power. We gave you religion. We gave you a Christ that you could follow. And all of that was just the opiate of the masses, right? Like Karl Marx talks about. And here, I'll show you. I can do miracles. He'll snap his finger and cancer will be cured worldwide. And he'll fix the water and he'll call down fire from heaven. Oh, the sun is blotted out from, whatever humanity did before this. I'm going to call down fire from heaven to warm you and get the gardens growing again. And I don't think it will be like I invented this great technology that is a satellite that shoots fire out of heaven. I think it'll be like dark, bad stuff that people perceive as light and say, oh yeah, this is so great. Yeah, I'll put the mark in my hand. I'll put the mark in my forehead. I'll follow you. Christ was just fake.
I agree. I try and tell people all the time that it's going to be really weird. You need to be thinking weirder than whatever you're thinking. I mean, we know he's going to deceive like the very elect and stuff, and like AI, that's not AI.
Yeah.
AI is not doing that. And I guess I could see them like maybe the Assyrian or something be like, oh yeah, this is AI telling me to do this as like a scapegoat. But it's not AI.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you on the AI stuff. Like they're like, it's demons running it. And I'm like, dude, there's demons in a lot of other places. This is one of the last places I'm going to look for demons. Like, granted, demons have infested all of humanity. Like, we live in this world that has demons. And so you mentioned Hollywood earlier, I think, and you got all of the content that's there that's, blessed on altars of weirdness and stuff like that. I mean, all of this crazy stuff. Yeah, I tend to think that AI is pretty cool, probably super dangerous eventually. Maybe there's demonic influences about it, but there's way more demonic stuff all around us now anyway that we got to watch out for.
Yeah, you guys are looking for demons in AI. It's just right here. Right here in Congress. There you go.
Between
for
the
people
Roman
listening,
columns.
Yeah. For the people listening, It's just a picture of Congress.
Yeah. So one thing I think, it talks about Revelation 13, which we can spend hours on, but talking about verse 12, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, which causeth the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. I think, and a lot of people have made a great case that is the beast that was wounded is the eagle, that the eagle was wounded, and that call it the Antichrist, the beast kingdom, or the head of the beast, says, I'll bring back America. I'll restore the Constitution. I'll give it all back to you. You can go back to your cars and your jobs and work on spreadsheets all day long. I'll give it all back to you. I'll heal the beast. And, we think of the beast as like this scary monster. There's a really good case for the beast being the eagle beast that, that Ezra saw and others saw.
This is the beast that the Assyrian raises up.
Well, Revelation 13, where, people talk about the Antichrist, that the Antichrist has power to heal the beast that was wounded.
Okay.
And so it's like America has to, if that beast that was wounded that the Antichrist brings back is America, that means America has to have fallen. So it goes back to this conversation that we're having earlier about the presidents and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, let me ask you this on the topic of the second coming and things being weird.
Yeah.
I've always thought, I don't know if I've ever said this, but I've always thought that as we get closer. Okay, let me start here. Sorry. So there was a story in the early days of the church. I don't remember who it was, but it's like some apostles or something. And they basically come under attack of like demonic forces. They like see these demons. The demons are trying to like hurt them. And they talk about how they were blessed because basically God made the demons look ridiculous. So it was just funny to them. They're like, oh, these guys are like,
dude, I've read a lot.
You've never heard this story?
No, I don't know.
Okay,
Keep going.
I'll try and find the reference. So yeah, it's like a firsthand account. And he's telling the story about how God blessed them and made the demons look ridiculous. But I think he asks Joseph about it. And Joseph basically says, similar to the first vision story, if Satan or demons, whatever, are showing themselves to you, it's like a last resort. Like nothing else has worked. Because by showing themselves to you, they're now proving the other side exists. So by showing themselves to you, it's like, this is our last attempt to try and basically kill you. I mean, if Satan could have killed Joseph in the grove, he would have.
Yeah.
And so I guess
oh, go ahead.
I guess what my idea is, as the second coming gets closer, I feel like Satan has to know that too. He's like, I'm about to lose. So I'm just going to I'm just coming out in the open, and all this like weird paranormal stuff that you always hear about is just going to become like in public. Have you ever thought about that or seen scripture or anything like that?
It's like Ghostbusters. Like all of a sudden there's all these.
Yeah.
I don't know about
ghosts.
that, but I think like a lot of more, I guess you could even say like ancient stuff of people starting to perform magic again and stuff like that, where like just publicly though.
Well, we're kind of seeing that. I mean, when you've got Jay-Z wearing a t-shirt that says "Do what thou wilt," which is a call back to Aleister Crowley, who back in the day was, just this psychotic Luciferian that people are like blown away by. And then Jay-Z is walking around with his t-shirt like, yes, these are my beliefs. This is what I espouse. So the normalization of this stuff, and we see it in Super Bowl halftime shows. We see it in the Grammy presentation. We see it in movies and film. There's no doubt that stuff is becoming more and more prevalent, even just blatantly dark, right? Right. I don't think that's what you're talking about. You're talking about something a little bit different and
a little more. I mean, like Pharaoh's priests, just straight up being like, "Hey, we just turned this water to blood," something like that.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I were literally just talking about kind of Satan's game plan. It's remarkable how effective he is running the same plays every time. It's like it's like in Bobby Boucher and the Mud Dogs. What's that show? Where Adam Sandler's the linebacker. You know what I'm talking about? Waterboy, right?
Yeah.
And the coach, the coach has the green book with all those plays, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've got these plays. They work every time." It's like Satan's playbook is the same over and over and over again. How many people have we seen fall into great suffering because of pride, because of wealth, because of lust, because of, all of those things that we know? He just runs the same game. Like, hey, I'm going to get this, I'm going to expose this kid to pornography when he's little and wire his brain so he's stuck there for the rest of his life until he turns 55 years old and his testosterone goes away, and then he actually can feel normal, right? I mean, it's that same playbook over and over and over again. Anger, passion, like all that stuff. So if he's pulling stuff like that out, then I think that is last ditch effort. I mean, there is in the scriptures, I'll think of the reference here in a minute, talking about the knowledge of the Lord will fill the land. I think this might even have been in our Come Follow Me this week. 2 Nephi 32, maybe 2 Nephi 33, where the knowledge of the Lord will fill the land so much that people can't disbelieve. So they actually have to choose to not believe. It's like, staring at the sun in midday and saying, that doesn't exist, and really believing it. I think that's where we're going to. And if that's the case, if the knowledge of the Lord fills the land so much that Satan only has the ability to, perform miracles in broad daylight to deceive people, that's pretty wild. I think you'll see. Go ahead.
Or even I just made a connection as you were talking to that story I was talking about, because the way Joseph says it to him is like they're showing themselves to you in an effort to make your heart fail. Like they're trying to kill you. They want you they want you so afraid and like to feel such darkness that your heart literally just gives out, which may make the last days saying we always hear of men's hearts will fail them a little more interesting.
Yeah, that's Matthew 24 and Joseph Smith, Matthew 1, right? Where he talks about men's hearts failing them. Yeah. Okay, so speaking of weirdness and weird weird things happening in the last days. Oh man, we're gonna have to edit this because I literally just lost my train of thought on that. I had something so good.
I was hoping it was going to be the cave story.
The cave story. What's the cave story?
The cave story with the goat head, and then you would tell us what you've seen in the wild.
Oh, yeah. No. Okay. I got it. Okay, so speaking of weirdness and weirdness in the last days, this goes back to I said earlier that one of my new neighbors who's an off-grid family that are starting their homestead, the guy, and remember the husband is all into like communism is the bad thing and it's going to kill us all and we got to watch out for communism and all this kind of stuff. He kind of pitched me on his idea of how this would all go down. He's like, oh, well, first thing is China's going to invade Taiwan and, and Russia's going to invade Poland and all of these things. And they're going to succeed and expand their kingdom. And then they're going to join together and invade the US. And it's kind of like this Cold War expectation of how everything's going to go down. And I'm listening to him and I'm like, that may very well be the case. Like, you've studied this way more than I have. You've obviously been on this since the times of Ezra Taft Benson. Like, this dude's 70 something years old. I'm like, that may very well be the case, but I actually think it's going to be a lot weirder than that. I actually think what we know as reality right now is long gone before a lot of these prophecies are fulfilled. And by long gone, I don't mean like 50 years from now. I think it's like, man, I can't even remember when we used to get on Facebook and like send each other videos of our kids and stuff like that. You and I have talked a little bit about Barron Trump. And so when we're talking about weirdness, I think that's an example of something that is super weird that totally could play out and probably will play out. You want to get into the Barron Trump stuff?
It's your theory. Go for it.
Well, I have a really good friend who is a scriptorian. He goes around and speaks. His videos are on YouTube. Phenomenal guy, way smarter than I am. And he, a few months ago was like, Mitch, I think Donald Trump might be the Assyrian. He and I had been going back and forth on in Third Nephi, like chapter 6, where the government collapses because of the Gadiantans, and prior to that, the Gadiantans laid siege, and then that all fell apart. But then the people repented, and then quickly they turned back to wickedness, and it just destroyed everything, and everybody went into tribes. And we were talking about, I had outlined how that process goes. And so we were talking about that, and he's like, I think Donald Trump may be the Assyrian. He might be the one that raises up the armies and invades the land and wipes out, all of the men. And anyway, we were talking about that, and it didn't work in my brain because I always figured the Assyrian was somebody from the East coming, either, China or Russia, or post China or Russia. And so I started looking into Trump and his background, and then something hit me. And it's that there are a lot of similarities between Barron Trump and Sennacherib. Well, who the crap is Sennacherib? Sennacherib is the Assyrian of Isaiah's day, like literally the guy who came in and wiped out Babylon and wiped out the northern kingdom and wiped out, took the 10 tribes away to the land of the north, right? And so there's some similarities there. So Sennacherib, who was the Assyrian, his father's name was Sargon. Sargon was a king, obviously, and there's some similarities between Sargon and Donald Trump. Number one, Sargon had 3 headquarter cities. He had a headquarters in Nineveh, which was the political capital. He had headquarters in Babylon, which is the financial capital. And then he created a third headquarters and it was called Dur-Shurukin. And he built a palace there and kind of put that place on the map. Well, Donald Trump has also had 3 main locations. One, Babylon, New York City, the financial capital of the world. 2, Washington, D.C., the political capital of the U.S., obviously, which would equate to Nineveh with Sargon. And then number 3, Mar-a-Lago, which is the small town where he built a palace and kind of put it on the map. So that was kind of interesting. Sargon had multiple children. His 2 sons from his first wife did not inherit the throne. Instead, his 3rd son from a subsequent wife, Sennacherib, inherited the throne. Well, Barron's got 2 older brothers that are from the first wife. They're half siblings. I don't know, I guess they could inherit the throne, but if Barron becomes this Assyrian empire of the emperor of the future, he would match that almost perfectly. Barron's name means something like a fierce warrior or something like that. And Donald Trump, Barron's personality and education has been very, suppressed, I guess you could say, or protected. But Donald Trump did say that his son plays war games all the time and is really good at them. And so I mentioned this to Chris a little while ago. I was like, dude, what if Barron is the thing? Like, Oh, the other thing is Sargon was killed in an international conspiracy, and he had taken control of Babylon, but never really fully controlled them. And so, anyway, Sargon was wiped out in this international conspiracy, and so I was like, dude, what if Donald Trump is taken out in an international conspiracy, which we would not doubt?
Oh man!
And Barron rises up and says, for my father's vengeance, join me. We're going to take out the powers of, that be that took out my father. And we're going to march against DC. Well, Sennacherib did that. He marched against the town where his father died and laid it waste. And then he marched into Babylon and tore it to the ground. Like there was nothing left of Babylon after Sennacherib got done with it. And so I told that to Chris, and Chris looks on Twitter, and I don't know if you could still even find it. It was months ago, but there was a recent picture of Barron getting out of one of the limousines, and he's like, what, 6'8" or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
He's good looking. He just turned 18 like last week. And somebody took that picture of Barron and compared it to Alexander the Great. And suddenly there were dozens, if not hundreds of comments of people pledging their allegiance to Barron for vengeance of his father. It's pretty wild. So, I mean, that's weird stuff, right? I mean, if Barron Trump becomes the emperor of the new world after the US has collapsed and Russia and China have fallen, it's super weird. We won't even remember the days when we used to scroll on TikTok all the time.
I was trying to find what Trump's name, like Donald Trump's name, means too. Because it's like, do you remember it?
I don't remember.
It's like, man, I can't remember. It's something similar, like bearer of the world ender or something like that.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Bearer of the world conqueror. I don't know. Something like that. Something crazy that fits perfectly with what you're saying. So
in all of this, oh, here you go. Yeah, look at that. Barron Trump looks like he belongs on a Roman coin. He will be my children's Caesar. I love it.
Here's one with him, with the statue like superimposed on him.
I mean, a quick search says Donald means ruler of the world.
Dang.
Okay.
So
no way.
But it's like, I think if you get really technical about it, it's like he's the bearer of the world ruler, not him himself.
Oh, like he gives birth to the world ruler.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm trying to find. Dang it. I don't know if I'm going to find it. It's funny because I typed in Barron Trump Caesar. I'm going to do it again. I spelled Caesar wrong. First tweet that comes up. It's time for the American empire to rise. The republic has fallen and a Caesar must rise. And in parentheses, Barron Trump.
I'm telling you, man. So, yeah, I think things are going to get super weird, of course. And that, okay, so full circle on this. One of the things that I think that we have to talk about that is super related to this is as the world gets weirder and as the world gets harder, I think more and more people will turn to the church. Well, even more and more people will turn to Christ because there's hope there. And it's promised throughout Scripture. You know, my yoke is, what is it? My burden is light. My yoke is light. Whatever it is. Sorry for butchering that, but I think people will flock to it. And so when President Nelson in Rome says this is a hinge point in the church, what was that? 2020 with the dedication of the Rome Temple. 2019, he's like, things are about to get exciting. Take your vitamin pills. Like, let's go. People are like, oh, he was talking about being healthy for COVID. I'm like, no, dude, it's a hinge point on a bar chart. It's like, boom, that's the hinge point, right?
See, that's a perfect example. Like people are looking for explanations that just seem logical in their current worldview, and I'm like, it's not that. It's weirder. It's weirder.
Totally. And so if you have the dollar collapses and you have literally governments collapsing and billions of people are trying to figure out how to survive. And they look for hope. They look to Christ. Maybe even they look to resources, and the LDS Church has a bunch of them. And then you have some character that appears on the world stage. And I always say he's going to be like a Chris Hemsworth guy who's like 6'6" and blonde hair and blue eyes and muscular. And he's like, I'm here from, ancient times to save you. And things get super weird. People will be like, nah, I believe in Christ. And he'll be like, no, Christ was a mythical creature that we gave you as the opiate to the masses. And people will be like, no, I'm looking for Christ. I have a relationship with him. I want to find him. And, they will find the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they'll be like, look, see, this church has his name and his image is on this church. Like, yeah, I may not believe with all of the tenets or doctrines of this church, but I believe in Christ. And since they're the only ones that are standing for him, I'm on board. And so I think that's where we see prophecy fulfilled. You've got President Kimball, who talks about much of the success of the church in the last days will be because of the goodness of the women, their articulateness and their faithfulness, as so many begin to stand for Christ in opposition of what the common belief will be. Man, people will flock to that. And we think we've got a lot of temples now. Yeah, it's because we have a lot of work to do. It's going to be amazing, miraculous.
I was just thinking, maybe people should ask themselves why we're building so many temples in like these small towns in Utah and Idaho and like these tiny towns. Why do we need temples there when there's no population? Is it because there may be a population coming that needs them?
Well, you've got a great example of that is San Pete Valley, where I live. We have the Manti Temple, which the open house is happening right now. It's beautiful and amazing. The line tends to be long, but if you go at like 4 p.m. on a weekday, there's no line. It's beautiful and it's amazing. And literally 10 minutes away from there is another temple being built. The Manti Temple is plenty big for our current population, but the Ephraim Temple, which is being built, again, 10 minutes away from it, it's built near a college campus to serve that campus and stuff like that. But yeah, man, I think this valley will be filled to the brim with people who need ordinance work done, who look to Christ, who want to serve their ancestors. And yeah, it's going to get really rad. It's going to get really terrible, but it's going to be awesome. It'll be great and terrible.
Yeah.
Or have I heard that before? You guys just need to be, the people listening need to be ready for refugees and Barron Trump taking over the country and bringing Nimrod back from the dead and Saturn becoming our sun again. It's going to get wild.
Man.
Yeah, so we're all worried about an eclipse and gas stations running out of fuel, and it's like, nah, bro, it's going to get wild. One comment about the eclipse. So I got in the scriptures and I was trying to understand. You've got the Joel chapter 2, which President Hinckley said was fulfilled right after 9/11. Where the moon will be turned to blood and the sun will be blotted out and there will be fire and pillars of smoke and stuff like that. Every reference that I could find about the sun being darkened had to do with clouds of darkness and not like the moon blocking out the sun. And there's some stuff as we just recently went through the Isaiah chapters in the Book of Mormon, or some of the Isaiah chapters in the Book of Mormon. Our Come Follow Me lesson, if you go through Isaiah, there are multiple places where he talks about darkness and, clouds of darkness, or darkness fills the land. Wherever you look, there's darkness. And so I'm like, well, that's the way he's describing it is not an eclipse. It's not like this, oh, you get 90 seconds of darkness or however long the eclipse is actually going to be. It's like the land is covered in darkness. Everywhere you look, there's darkness. And that took me to Helaman chapter 5, where, remember, they're in the prison and then the cloud of darkness comes and the people are like, what's going on? And this one dude he's like an inactive member. He was raised in the church, but, I don't know, started drinking coffee when he was a teenager or whatever. He's like, oh yeah, we all need to pray. And so they start praying and the darkness starts to dissipate. And what do they see? They see the prophets there, and they have light, and they're conversing with God. And so, it's them not seeing God. They're seeing the prophets who are seeing angels and conversing with them. And then the darkness dissipates as the people believe. Then you've got the darkness in Lehi's dream as people are traveling to the tree, and these mists of darkness arise. And you've got the darkness when Christ dies that fills the land. And anyway, so I think about the eclipse, and yes, it may be a sign. Usually signs are foretold by prophets. Usually prophets are like, hey, there's going to be a day and a night and a day with no darkness, and that's going to signify the birth of Christ, or hey, there's going to be 3 days of darkness. I'll give it to you as a sign. Or like Isaiah talking to Ahaz, hey, there's going to be a virgin will give birth. Or, John in Revelation chapter 12, hey, there will be a woman with 10 stars on her head and the sun on her shoulder and the moon on her, feet, and she'll give birth to a son and all this kind of stuff. It's like usually signs are foretold by prophets. And so I don't know of any prophet saying, hey, this 2024 eclipse is going to be a sign of things to come. And I appreciate the people who do the work to, look for what this may mean, and not to discount what they do, because I certainly don't know as much as they do. But I'm like, if it was a sign, I'm pretty sure we would be told that it was a sign. And anyway, so I'm not too concerned about the eclipse. We'll find out in a couple of weeks if I should have been concerned. But I tend to think it's going to be a great opportunity for people to witness the majesty of the organization that God has, and that he built this place for us. That would be pretty cool.
The other thing is that the other side thinks it's going to be weird, for sure, and they're into all the weird stuff. So you're really not doing yourself a favor by not being into it. Have we talked ever? I know we haven't on this show, but have we ever talked about the story of Bohemian Grove and Hubble telescope?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you guys real quick.
I know about Bohemian Grove and I know about Hubble telescope, but I don't know how those two are related.
Okay, bear with me because we're going to pretend that space is real for a minute. But
yeah, I'm okay with pretending that for a minute.
Okay. There's an author. I'll have to do some digging and find who it was, but he was writing a biography of like someone famous, and the person invited him to Bohemian Grove. So he is asking him questions about it. I think this is in the 90s, I think.
Okay.
And the guy's like, I don't know, man. It's just like a big party for me. There's like drugs and prostitutes, and I just go and party. And he's like, but some of the people take it really seriously, and it's like a big thing for them. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, they talk about things they want to happen in the world. And he said, one of the big things they're talking about this year is getting another telescope up into space that could see far. And the author, this is like the same year that Hubble was launched.
Okay.
So the author's like, well, my understanding is it's going to take like 200 years before we can even get through all the stuff Hubble is going to show us. So why are they already wanting something bigger that can look deeper? And the guy's like, look, man, I don't believe in this stuff, but they do. and they want a telescope that can see far into space because they want to see Jesus Christ coming back and try and stop him.
Oh, dude. Okay.
So this is like, I'll have to find the book. I'm pretty sure it's like a pretty well-known author who wrote it. But he does this interview, and then it's just like a side story in the book. But I'm like, holy crap! Like,
What?
it's wild,
Dude, I'm trying to remember if I've ever heard that before. That is wild. That's some like Tower of Babel stuff right there.
It is.
Yeah.
It's very similar, and there's the whole like sign of I'm going to really butcher this. The sign of the Son of Man. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the scripture says something like they'll call it a comet, like the sign of the people will see the sign of the Son of Man and they'll call it a comet. And it's not that much far. It's not a far stretch to be like, oh yeah, the NASA's going to say that's a comet and it's going to hit Earth, so we need to send a nuke at it or something. Like we need to blow it up.
Yeah. Dude, that's some weird stuff right there. Well, and you do have to pretend that space is real for a minute if you believe that.
You do, yeah.
Yes. So you're saying it's not real? Is that like a whole other show?
That's a different story. That's a different topic. Yeah, a different show. What's crazy to me is, I mean, TikTok has been the thing to introduce so many people to these concepts. You know, we all, for, you know, a little bit made fun of the flat earthers because, you know, they were goofy and weird. And now, you know, people get to hear their case on TikTok and they're like, maybe the earth isn't exactly what they said it is, you know. And there's always been biblical earth people that take the descriptions of the earth from the Bible and have constructed a model. You know, those have been around ever since Protestantism, maybe even prior to that. But yeah, TikTok has been this awesome, wild platform for exploring these weird and crazy ideas. It's been kind of cool to see.
It's almost turned me into a flat earther. I'm not there yet, but I definitely don't think that the earth is what they say it is. That I'm 100% sure of.
Well, that's a funny thing. I think there are so many of us that are like now questioning everything that we've been taught. I mean, no matter what it was, from history to psychology, like whatever it is, we're like, is that really how it was? You know, or is this just the winners get to write the history, right? Or are they just telling us what they want us to know? I'm trying to find, I'm Googling on my phone here to see, I'm going back to your Bohemian Grove thing. The Bohemian Club, there's actually an early president of the church who was invited out to the Bohemian Club, not the Bohemian Grove, but the Bohemian Club. And then he died mysteriously like 2 days later. So he took a train out there, came back, was sick, and died. And so there's the conspiracy theory that the Bohemian Club killed one of the prophets. And it was a long time ago. It was, you know, John Taylor type age, Wilford Woodruff, that kind of thing.
Interesting. I have not heard that. Yeah.
I'll have to find it. Yeah, Dan, so we can talk about that. One thing that I do know about flat earthers is it becomes their new God. It becomes their new doctrine. They can't not talk about it. And it is because I think it's so disruptive to what they experienced and what they believed their whole life that it's like, whoa, this is a new gospel. Everybody has to have this awakening that I've felt because now I know that the earth is not round or whatever. And so I've had good friends that we used to talk gospel topics and now we talk flat earth stuff every time we get together. It's kind of annoying.
Well, I mean, so Joseph and Brigham, they didn't say the earth was flat, but they definitely said it was not what we're told it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with that. one of my ancestors is the one. I've got quite a few ancestors that were involved in church history and wrote stuff down in their journals. And like my great great grandfather, Obie Huntington, Oliver Boardman Huntington, was one of the ones that wrote about people on the moon. Joseph said there are people on the moon, and his sister Zina, who my daughter is named after, was one of the ones that was married to Joseph, was sealed to Joseph, and then was married to Brigham, that the apostates and antis always bring up against the church. And I'm like, dude, you don't know anything about this lady. I know everything that there is to know about this lady that we have record of. And you got it wrong. I'm sorry. But yeah, you're right. I think it's pretty well documented that they said the scientists of the time did not have the answers. And I think a lot of us are on board with that these days too.
Yeah, one day we'll have to get into the whole Darwin being the science counter to the gospel being restored.
Yeah, Morgan Philpott does a really a good job at describing Karl Marx as the antithesis of Joseph Smith, where Karl Marx came out just a short time after Joseph Smith did, and where Joseph was trying to build the kingdom of God on the earth, Karl Marx was trying to destroy God entirely. And there's some great, I guess not parallels, but the opposite end of the spectrum from both of those, a weight and a counterweight. And there's pretty interesting stuff. His stuff's on YouTube. You can go check it out. And he actually happens to be a neighbor of mine. So we get to spend a lot of time together and talk about weird stuff. It's great. So, I live on this homestead. I'm trying to create this life for my family. And now I'm trying to provide this type of experience for others. Both of you guys live in town. You live in Babylon, we could say. You live in Jerusalem at the time of Lehi. What are your thoughts as we talk about weird stuff and times changing? What are you guys doing to prepare for all of this spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, temporally, all that kind of stuff?
I'm not giving any of that away. No, I think we've
I'm not asking your list of preps necessarily. Yeah. I mean, it's like, what are the priorities? And it doesn't, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, well, we have 200 gallons of rainwater.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like the most prepared because I have family nearby that's extremely prepared. And I'm like, my plan is just to get to their house. And they know that. And we've helped each other prepare and stuff. And so it's kind of a mutual understanding. So there's that. I do prepare. I mean, like I'll get extra water and extra food when I'm at the store, the basic things. The physical preparedness is good, but like recently I've really leaned into that. I think we're going to need to be extremely spiritually capable. And there's like prophecies of that the elders will use the priesthood to keep this valley safe and stuff.
Yeah.
But you got to have people who are like willing to or able to do that, I should say. And so I've been really focusing on that. Like I'll be prepared as much as I can physically, but I also hope that maybe one day I can at least call down a single miracle, a small single miracle that will help me. So
that's great. What about you, Dan?
I think for me, it's been on both sides. I definitely agree with Chris, like making sure that you're spiritually prepared. And so, as if my family's trying to do the basic things, like make sure that we're like not just going to church, but actually being part of the group of people within our ward, even that actually does things right and takes action and says yes to different things and helps out. And we've been finding that there's just a small group, even within the whole congregation, that seems to be okay and willing to do anything. And so, unfortunately, that's the case. But we want to make sure that we're with that group, right? And we also just want to make sure that our kids know like what the temples are and what they're for. And so we take them to the open houses every chance we can and let them get that exposure. And so those are some of the more maybe spiritual things that we're doing. I mean, we're trying to read scriptures pretty consistently and like help them understand the Book of Mormon better and things like that. From the more physical side of things, we've got the 72-hour kit backpacks hanging up in the garage and, some of those basic things. So the next step is for me to actually get strong enough to be able to carry all 7 backpacks, because I highly doubt my kids are going to be able to. But those are just some of the main things that come to my mind that I've been trying to do. And then I would say the next thing is just talking to you guys and like understanding some of all this crazy stuff that could possibly play out, just so that I can kind of be more prepared that way and just be paying attention, to the signs and what's happening.
I have 2 more thoughts.
All right. Yeah. Let's hear 'em.
In terms of the spiritual preparation, I mean, President Nelson said, you're not going to be able to survive the coming days if you can't get personal revelation. So there's clearly going to be a spiritual component to it. And then in terms of physical preparation, I think more than having, this is a big Dwelt thing really, but more than just having the supplies is learning the skills you're going to need, because the supplies are going to run out and then you're going to have to know how to do things.
Yeah. This is, that reminds me, I got a text just a few hours ago before we did this, from a good friend of mine who's not a believer. And I love this guy. He's so great to be around. He's so fun. He's so funny. Great guy. He's loving, he's caring. He does things for other people. And he texts me the link to dweltsafehavens.com. And then he sends me a bunch of mind blown emojis. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, this is peak Mitch. I'm so excited to see you crush this." And I said, thanks and everything. And I said, people are all hyped about prepping and homesteading these days because things are getting weird. And I capitalized weird. And he goes, "I agree. By the way, your posts have led me down some anxiety-inducing rabbit holes lately, because I've been posting on X about some of this stuff." That was kind of funny. Dan, what you were talking about earlier reminds me of this talk by Elder Bednar in October of 2020. I don't know if you remember it. He makes this joke, and it was one of the more awkward general conference jokes that I've heard. That, there's some real great ones, like Elder Uchtdorf standing up and saying, I think it was President Uchtdorf at the time, he's telling some story and he goes, "Now you may be there sitting there thinking, what does this have to do with aviation?" And then he goes, "I'll tell you." And then he brings it back to an aviation analogy. Or when President Nelson gave his talk about, I think it was about contention. And he's like, don't be contentious, be forgiving, be a good person, all that kind of stuff. And then he's like, if you're sitting there thinking, this would be really great advice for somebody, my spouse, to hear, he's like, I hope it does help them. That was a good one. But Elder Bednar, he talks about during COVID, he opens up his 72-hour kits and he's like, I was worried that we might be inflicting the world with yet another plague because the food was so bad or whatever. It's like this awkward joke. But then he says this, he goes, some church members opine that emergency plans and supplies, food storage, and 72-hour kits must not be important anymore because the brethren haven't spoken about it recently and extensively, because the brethren have not spoken recently and extensively about these and related topics in general conference. And then he says, but repeated admonitions to prepare have been proclaimed by leaders of the church for decades. The consistency of prophetic counsel over time creates a powerful concert of clarity and a warning volume far louder than solo performances can ever produce. And I think right there, it's like prophets have talked about this stuff for a long time, decades and decades. So we need to be physically prepared. But then he says, just as challenging times reveal inadequacies in temporal preparedness, so too the maladies of spiritual casualness and complacency inflict their most detrimental effects during difficult trials. So I think that ties back to what President Nelson said, where as we go through difficult trials, if we haven't done the spiritual preparedness, then we're going to have troubles. Like it's going to be difficult for us. There was one of the people I follow on X. She's awesome and she's so faithful. I want to see if I can find what she said, but she posted a picture of her vacuuming at the church, or like, no, it was in the gym. She was like sweeping the gym. Let me see if I can find it.
I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I think was it Laura?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, now I'm trying to find it.
Okay, Twitter's.
Oh, here we go.
Sorry, X's search feature has been so bad lately. I don't know what changed, but you can't find anybody.
It's Laura the cellist. She says, you want to sit on the stand and lead more meetings, but will you even do this? And it's her cleaning the church. And she's obviously targeting the women who had issues with, the General Relief Society meeting earlier this week. And there you go. You want to sit on the stand and lead more meetings, but will you even do this? And Dan, as you were talking about the people in your ward who are anxiously engaged, I call it the SDP. It's the STP stands for same 10 people.
Yes.
And it's like they just play musical chairs in ward council, right?
Yeah.
But I have a brother who is so awesome. As we talk about the challenging times that we're in and the news that, people are suffering all around the world. He's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Like, we should go solve this problem. And I'm like, you know what we do? What we do is we go visit our neighbor. That's what we do. That's our big strategy. We're going to go visit our neighbor, because if we can go visit our neighbor and love them and serve them, we solve the problems that we can handle here. And we don't have to worry about solving the problems everywhere else. Like if we go visit our neighbor, I think that's the spiritual preparedness, where we get to know their needs, their wants, what they're going through, how to help them. And, we'll probably have to do an episode of my health experience last year.
Yeah.
But I saw that, man. I saw neighbors show up. They cleaned our house. They mowed our lawn. They fed our goats. Like they collected chicken eggs for us. They did a lot. And I think that's the key to most of this. We need to go visit our neighbors.
I love it.
Yeah, I agree.
That may be a good note to end on. What do you guys think?
I think so.
I thought we could dive into the NCAA tournament results today.
You thought wrong, man.
Yeah.
What's that?
Couldn't tell you. I don't know. I do have an update. We were all waiting on the 14 Russian planes.
Oh, let's hear it. Uh-oh. So bad news?
I mean, they bombed Ukraine. That's
dang.
Some missiles did go into Polish airspace, but it doesn't look like they hit anything in Poland. So,
okay.
Poland will probably be mad and say, "Don't do that again," and we'll just go back to how things were. So,
man, that sucks. I feel so bad for those people. Like all the people involved. It's so terrible.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, so maybe we take an action item out of this, and maybe a challenge to our listeners. Let's do this. Let's all commit to go visit a neighbor this week. Like pop in, see how they're doing. Bring them a treat or not. But let's go visit a neighbor. You guys down for that?
Yeah. I can visit a neighbor.
I think if all of our hundreds of listeners, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of listeners would go visit their neighbors, we could solve this all right here and now.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
All 20 million of you get out there.
Go
visit your neighbors.
That's right.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for spending the time with us today. We really do. We're gonna keep the conversation going, and we've got some specific things that we want to talk about. Obviously, current events, gospel topics, homesteading, preparedness, spiritual preparedness, and we hope that everything that we share is edifying. And just one, I think, comment from me: follow the prophet. Follow the prophet. Don't go astray, and go visit your neighbor.
Done.
Awesome.
Over.
Awesome. Thanks,
Podcast
everyone.
done.